Hello, I'm Sarah Hilary, and I'm the author of Someone Else's Skin.
Pull up a comfy chair and settle down for another great book from the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
It's been dubbed a superbly disturbing debut.
A uniformed stranger is unwinding police tape methodically.
Spectacular and enthralling.
Marnie watches from the safety of the car, her fingers icy on the ignition key.
We love it, but now's your chance to decide on Someone Else's Skin, Sarah Hilary's compelling first thriller, our next choice on the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
Why not check out the latest in the Richard and Judy Book Club via Kobo? Use your Kobo e-reader or just your smartphone and the free Kobo app. Richard and Judy introduce you to Sarah Hilary and her book, Someone Else's Skin.
The edge of her eye catches Mrs. Poole, her parents' neighbour, huddled in the porch of number 12. Her face is spotty with shock and there's a foil blanket around her shoulders, but no one is with her. All the action is next door. No one else is hurt, or the cordon would be wider. Normally, that would be a comfort, the fact that the damage is contained, private. Seeing Marnie, Mrs. Poole moans, a hand coming up to hide her mouth. Marnie ducks to pass under the tape. "Miss, you can't go in there." Up close, the acne is lurid, red and yellow. The PCSO squares up to her, authority lending him an inch in all directions. She shows her badge, remembering too late that after the DS it gives her surname, Rome, like the couple in the house. DS Marnie Rome, Greg and Lisa's little girl.
Welcome back to the Richard and Judy Book Club in conjunction with WHSmith. And we're now going on to a first-time author, Sarah Hilary, who has written an amazingly good thriller, frighteningly good thriller actually, Someone Else's Skin. And Sarah's here with us now. Nice to see you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Congratulations on this, because it is a first book. Was it, because it is a thriller and everything, was it a long time in conception? I'll talk about the story in a minute, but had you wanted to write a thriller? Had this been kind of in your mind for a while?
Yes, I'd always wanted to write crime because I'd always loved reading crime, but I'd got it into my head that I wouldn't be able to hack the plotting part of it.
Right.
So I'd put off attempting to do it for some years.
Yeah.
And then I just got hooked on the story for this and the idea and the characters. And so in actual fact, the physical writing of it was quite fast.
Yeah.
3 or 4 months probably from start to end.
Are you saying you're one of those infuriating authors who manages to plot the whole damn thing out in advance?
No? I'm terrible. I'm a terrible plotter. I'm a terrible plotter.
So you just went for it, basically?
I did. And I also find with earlier attempts, I tried to plot. And I bought an A3 pad and some coloured Post-it notes. And I did it, and it was amazing. It was full, and it looked like a science project. And I was so bored of the story by the time I'd done that.
Yeah.
So part of what I love writing is the discovery, finding out the story as you go.
Well, that's exactly how the writing comes across in this book. You go on this extraordinary journey. At the heart of the story is violence. It's all about violence.
Well, it's about domestic abuse.
Absolutely. So just give us just conceptualise it briefly for us.
Well, it's about an event that unfolds in a women's refuge, in a women's shelter. And my heroine, Marnie Rome, and her partner, DS Noah Jake, are sent there to try and get a witness statement from one of the women that's in hiding from her family. So it seems as if it's going to be a fairly routine investigation. But as they turn up at the women's refuge, they walk into the middle of a new crime scene. There's a husband of one of the women that's hiding has somehow got into the refuge, and he's brought a knife into the refuge, and his wife has stabbed him.
She stabbed him?
She's stabbed him, and he is on the floor, bleeding very badly in front of a room full of witnesses, all of whom are traumatised, damaged women, and they fight to save his life. And it seems very cut and dried. It seems exactly what it was, an act of desperate self-defence. The witnesses are all telling similar and yet somehow varied stories. But as they start to investigate, they realise that it's not simple at all. There's a lot more going on here. People start disappearing from the refuge, and they realise that there's quite a lot of secrets that people are hiding.
It's a real spine tingler. It really is.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
And also, I mean, I won't give away any of this, but there is a fairly fantastic twist, which you don't actually see coming, but which actually I think is perhaps the point of the book. And you went at the beginning when Hope stabs her husband in the refuge. everyone assumes, the police assume that basically she did it in self-defence and all the rest of it. Obviously it's the husband's fault, but gradually, as Detective Marnie Rome investigates the case, she realises much more to it than that, psychologically and in every way. And you also look at, don't you, the sort of the domestic abuse, a different kind of domestic abuse, not by a husband, but by a family in certain Asian families. Is that what led you into it? And you tackle both sides of it really well, I think.
Thank you, thanks. Well, I realised there were lots of stories I wanted to tell. I always tend to go into a story with lots of voices in my head. And they were, all the women in the refuge have a story to tell, and they're all very different stories. And I wanted to make it clear that often when you have a body of people in a closed environment like a prison, as a society I think we tend to group them together somehow. We think they're in the same place probably for the same reason or similar reasons. A homogenous bunch. Exactly. And what I wanted to make clear was that there's all kinds of different reasons that people become afraid or go into hiding. They've all got different stories that they will be different people that they're hiding from. In some cases, not necessarily who you think they're hiding from. It might be something far more complicated than that.
Tell us about Marnie, D.I. Marnie Rome. She's a great character, and rather like the characters you just mentioned in the book. She too has a past.
She does.
Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, well, 5 years ago, which is where the book opens, something truly horrible happened in Marnie's life. After she had left home, which she did at a fairly early age, her parents fostered a young boy, and he was 8 when he went to live with them. And after he'd been with them for about 6 years, he violently murders them. And Marnie comes home to find her home at crime scene, and that's where the book begins. And then we move into the present, and you can see that Marnie has got lots of different ways she's coping with what has happened. One of them is
including staying in touch with him.
She is absolutely, yes. She is trying. She desperately wants answers. She's a detective by instinct as much as by training, and she wants to know why this thing happened. She wants to make sense of it so she can move past it. She's also a bit guilty because she ran away from home fairly early, the first chance she got. She didn't perhaps love her parents or appreciate their love for her as much as she might have done when they were alive. So there's guilt in the mix as well.
And then there's her bag man, I suppose you could call him Noah.
Yes.
Who's got issues because he's black, he's gay, and he's a cop.
Yes, although
these present difficulties.
They do. Although what I wanted to do with Noah, really, in a way, was to make those things unremarkable as I could.
Yes.
Because he doesn't have an issue with his sexuality or the fact he's half Jamaican or his career choice. He's very happy. In fact, he's probably the only character in the book that has a perfectly happy home life.
He's totally
he's having a great time. But yes.
My God, does he suffer near the end? We're not giving anything away again, but I actually found that quite hard to read, that particular sequence in the house towards the end. And for someone like you, it's a first-time novel and a first-time crime writer, I mean, some of the physical details in the book really are quite strong, aren't they? Did you find that difficult?
The terrible admission is that no. I really enjoyed writing those. Somebody did say that to me. They said, you've had such a long, dark sequence. How did you live with yourself for all those weeks? You must have been writing those scenes, and then at the end of the day, you'd make your family's supper. And how did you switch off? And I had to admit, I wrote them really quickly because I found them actually. My mind is a very dark place. Somebody has pointed out to me, and I hadn't appreciated it until I realised that actually those were some of my favourite scenes to write. I think because I was so very much in the moment, and it felt very visceral, and that's the kind of stuff I like to read. So
also, it's those sequences in any book of this nature. They're kind of like the big firework display.
Yes.
That's the big one going off. And you want it to have impact, don't you?
Do.
You want people to go ah.
Absolutely. I think the worst thing, the only crime books I don't enjoy are the ones where you feel numb because it's been a catalogue of things, and you haven't had that moment where you've actually connected at any point to the characters.
Or you don't see it coming, and there it is on the page in front of you.
Well, I think that Someone Else's Skin it's very, very clever on several levels. One of them is as a straightforward crime thriller drama, very, very strong book to read, a complete page turner, but also the way that you make it a complete questioning of all our assumptions, particularly about the relationships between men and women, but also the relationships, as we say, prejudice generally between, and family hatred or about dishonour in Asian families. Noah, who's black and who's gay and who's also a cop. And the whole thing is full of questions, and it makes it absolutely fascinating. Are you doing a sequel? Or?
I am. In fact, it's the beginning of a series. So I've just
with Marnie.
Yes, absolutely. Marnie and Noah. I've just
Excellent.
handed in the second one, and I've just started the third one. So
well, I should say to people
excellent.
who start with this, as they will, if you think as you're going through it, I know where this is going, you don't.
No.
As Judy says, the twist is the twist de la twist.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
DS Rome, he says quietly. Marnie, using her first name. It's worse, much worse. Please, she just wants to get inside the house. She's shaking with cold out here. Sir, please. He steers
Whatever
her
the
with his
book,
hand on her
wherever
shoulder.
you read, carry our reviews with you. Download the Richard and Judy Book Club and be part of the debate on Twitter and Facebook.
Not yet. Not yet. He holds her in place with his bear's paw, but he can't stop her seeing past his shoulder to where a socko is coming out, bloody knees to his white overalls and a poly bag held in front of him at arm's length. A knife, Mum's bread knife, its steel teeth full of tattered, red skin.
Now, Someone Else's Skin is, first of all, a terrific thriller, a terrific crime novel, which are so popular these days. But also it's very, very different. It has a completely different subtext or agenda than any other crime thriller that I can remember reading. It's in a sense almost about the eternal gender wars between men and women and the relationships between them, and whether everything between men and women is always, as we as a society assume, for example, domestic abuse.
Yes, you're right. I mean, the opening scene takes place in a woman's refuge where battered women go for protection. And our two protagonists, our two policemen, arrive on a routine inquiry to do with something quite low level and stumble upon a murder. A stabbing has taken place. And it's not the kind of stabbing you'd expect in a refuge for battered women. And that's the first thing, I think, which starts to throw your perceptions. She really does challenge your expectations, as you say, of the relationship between men and women, and particularly the violence that can take place between both sexes.
Yes, and I mean, you don't know that for a long time you go along with the general assumption. It just throws up our own prejudices. You go along with the general assumption about women's refuges, the kind of women who are in there, the reasons, their histories, whether or not they are all worthy of enormous pity, or maybe they're not, and there are all sorts of different reasons for this. And of course it also analyses, it's not just domestic abuse between husband and wife, but it starts off with one of these dreadful stories that we occasionally read about honour killings in Asian families, where the daughter of the house has destroyed, in the family's eyes, the father's eyes, the brother's eyes, and more, destroyed the honour of the family by doing something or meeting someone or having a relationship with someone who's outside and must be punished. Yeah. So it's all about that kind of family domestic agenda, and it's all completely, it turns all your perceptions upside down.
The author also uses some tried and trusted sort of techniques. For example, a Detective Inspector Marnie, she has a troubled past, and that is often the case, isn't it, with screen detectives and fictional detectives, that they haven't had the best of childhoods or the best of upbringings. And that's certainly true there, but actually the backstory that she weaves for Marnie is brilliant. I mean, it's really absorbing in its own right and explains a great deal about her.
It's a fascinating book, and for a debut thriller I think it's fantastic because it's really tautly plotted and very original, I think, just very original and very compelling.
Hello, I'm Sarah Hilary, and I'm the author of Someone Else's Skin. I love the early stages of writing. I love the idea when it's bubbling away inside my head. I think it's Iris Murdoch who said a novel is a great idea ruined, and unfortunately I do have an element of that what I execute on the page is never quite what I had in my head at the outset. It's never quite as brilliant, as dazzling, as wonderful as that, but it's often darker than the idea I had in my head, which is always gratifying, and it's always different, and that's one of the reasons that I write, is to surprise myself and to learn about a topic that has interested me, and that, I think, is the great joy of writing for me. Oh, hugely influenced by other authors, yes. I love to read my contemporaries in crime especially, but I also love to read and reread. Rereading is my great indulgence. I have some books that I just adore and I'll read again, and they always reinvigorate me. If I've got weary or tired, then to reread something that is an amazing book like Thomas Harris's first 2 books, Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs. Every time I reread those, I still can't figure out how on earth he wrote such amazing books. There's something different every time I read them. And I'm not trying to be like him. I don't have an interest in writing that kind of book. I don't write about serial killers, for instance. But something about the world that he creates and the way that he goes into human psychology and the humour that's hiding in there is just wonderful. So I would never stop reading. Reading is a great pleasure. When I see my book on the shelves in WHSmith, it's just amazing. I worked as a bookseller briefly, and I had such terrible shelf envy, in a good way, because I love books, but stacking those shelves and dreaming of one day being one of those books, and to have it come true is just absolutely amazing. I'll be standing there. I'll be the person standing in WHSmith pinching myself until I'm blue. So if you see me doing that, you please come and stop me before I pinch myself too much. But it's amazing. It's just fantastic.
Next on the Richard and Judy Book Club Autumn Series.
But even so, I felt like those tiny boats miles and miles away were part of my wedding too, and so was the sun and the stars beyond it, which sounds a bit over the top and a little crazy. But that was how I felt, like the centre of all existence.
A story that touches many of us. What happens when your memory starts to fade? Rowan Coleman joins us to talk about The Memory Book. That's the next book in this series of the Richard and Judy Book Club.
Whatever the book, wherever you read, carry our reviews with you. Download the Richard and Judy Book Club and be part of the debate on Twitter and Facebook.